Hello again, friends, and welcome to a special Side Jobs edition of 151. My name is Adam. We are brought to you by Skeleton Wine. You can find out more about them at their website, skeletonwine.com, or on their Facebook page at Skeleton Vineyards. Go there, like their page, and it makes us look good. So that's the long and short of that. As for us, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr, all at 151 The Show. And we hope that you subscribe to our Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, and every other channel we are associated with. Joining me on the show tonight, special guest from the warm, sunny north that is Minnesota. He's a forensic geologist.
Warm, no. Sunny, yeah. Sunny, yes.
He is a forensic geologist. He's the host of America Unearthed. He has the softest hands this side of the Mississippi. Friends, join me in welcoming Scott Wolter to the show. Hey, Scott.
How you doing, Adam?
Is it a little frigid up there right now?
Well, Jan and I just went to the store here about a half hour ago, and it was -6.
Oof.
So, and we had about 6 inches of snow last night. It's actually quite pretty. I mean, if you think about it in that regard. But the cold, I can live without. I'd like it a little warmer.
We just came off like record low temperatures for Iowa last week or the week before, and it was just, I mean, you walked outside and it was just suffocating.
I know. Well, we had the same thing at our house on Tuesday night of last week, a week ago. Wait, what's today?
Friday.
I guess it was last week. Yeah, it was -30.
Everybody always says, why do you live there? Why do you live in a place where that your face hurts? And then you see the pictures of like the giant snake.
Because when spring comes, you're just so relieved, and it's just magical. And then when the leaves come out and the flowers bloom, it's really beautiful because everything was completely gone. And then, summers are great, and we can get up to 100 degrees and more. Not very often, but, a few days of summer we usually hit 100. And then fall is just spectacular. I love when the leaves turn and sunny. It's brisk, but it's beautiful. And then, of course, we have winter, which makes you appreciate those other 3 seasons even more. So,
well, that's what I was saying. I mean, that meme, it shows, it goes, why do I live in a place where that makes my face hurt? And then it shows the giant snake climbing up the side of the house, and it's like, that's why. So
yeah, it's nice. So we like it here.
No, absolutely. I've got a buddy that lives up in Duluth, and he loves it up there. So,
yeah.
Scott, before we get too far into this tonight, I've got a funny story for you. It's one of those "it's funny how life works out" stories for you. Last summer, and as we talk about the weather, which I know that's why you came on this show.
Yeah.
Last summer we had a night where we had 10 inches of rain in about 4 hours.
Oh my gosh.
I've lived in the Midwest all my life, and I've never seen it rain that hard, and I've never seen it rain that hard for that long.
Jeez.
So
that's flash flood type of weather.
Yeah, that's where this is kind of heading. We the studio we use, and when I say studio, I mean my basement.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But we had some flood damage, and as the summer went and fall and everything, and we got everything set up again, and we were able to start recording shows, I start putting together a list in my head of people I want to talk to. And I remembered you from a morning show I was a part of a couple years ago. You came on, you were great on air, and you were fascinating to listen to. And I was like, I want to listen. I want to talk to that to him again. And it was one of those moments where I couldn't. Like, I knew exactly who you were, but I couldn't place your name. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm driving into work, and I kind of file it away, and it's like, okay, I'll look it up later, and we'll get it sorted out. So I get into work, and I'm not kidding on any of this. I get into work, and I'm getting my day going, and I put on Coast to Coast in the background, right? And I just grabbed some random video at the top of their YouTube page. It said something about Knights Templar, and Jimmy Church was hosting, and he has this guy on, and I start listening, and I'm like, that voice sounds familiar. I think that's him. And then they brought up something about the Kensington Runestone. I'm like, oh my God, that's him. So I looked up, your name, and I'll be damned if that wasn't you.
Yep. No, Jimmy Church is a good friend, and I've been on Coast to Coast a number of times, and Jimmy will call and we'll get on there and we just have a good time talking about whatever, but we end up invariably talking about the Templars in America. And, it's a fascinating subject for people. And, when we talk about the evidence that supports that premise, it's basically bulletproof, but yet, the standard academic world just won't even talk about it, let alone embrace what is obvious. Part of me finds that disappointing, and part of me finds that to be ironic. I mean, it's like, what are they afraid of? I know what they're afraid of. There's a couple things that they're afraid of, but it's amazing how if it doesn't fit the accepted narrative, you just get put on ice and, shut down, and it's really strange when, to me, it's self-evident and obvious, and the evidence is just all around us, and the status quo just won't even touch it.
This is interesting because this is something I wanted to ask you about a little bit later in the interview, but since we're here, why is it that that history of all the different subjects out there, like something comes up in mechanical engineering and it's like, oh, it's a better way of doing it, or we discovered something, hey, that's cool. Astronomy and chemistry and every other thing, it's like something new comes up and it's like, okay, cool, we can accept that. History, something comes up and they're like, no, sorry, that's just not the way yeah, but there's evidence here. Yeah, no, sorry, we don't care. Why is it anybody messes with history and all of a sudden it's like, no, sorry, we're not doing that?
There's actually a lot of reasons. Part of it is, people especially in academia, who have staked their reputations and their careers on a particular narrative or some aspect of that narrative. And all of a sudden you have something that completely changes that narrative and really puts their work, for lack of a better, in the garbage dump. I mean, it just completely makes it
invalid, I guess.
Void. Pardon me?
It's not that it really makes it invalid, but it's like you discovered something new. Just learn it and go with it. Why is it like, no, we're not even going to read about it. We're not going to accept it, and we're not going to do anything with it.
Well, the other problem is that when you start to accept that the Templars carved and placed, the Kensington Runestone as a land claim, that the Newport Tower was built by the Templars as part of establishing a settlement. You've got the Spirit Pond runestones, you've got the Narragansett runestone, you've got the Westford Knight, you got the Boat Stone, there's just all kinds of things that are staring people in the face. We've put them in their proper context. The evidence is conclusive and really tells a different narrative about how this country was founded. But what happens is, once you start to accept something like the runestone, you trigger a series of dominoes that go to inconvenient places that certain entities like the Roman Catholic Church doesn't want to go. There are elements within our government that don't want to go there. I mean, the runestone is a land claim, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, it can't be a land claim because the whole narrative with Christopher Columbus and Manifest Destiny and that whole, crock of what is what our history is supposed to be. And anything that flies in the face of that is not acceptable. So that's part of it. But really, even, the people that are pushing back here are starting to lose traction because things are becoming so obvious. I mean, the evidence trail of the Templars founding America, turning the job over to their ideological ancestor or descendants, the Freemasons. And last I checked, let's see, our country was founded by George Washington. He was a Mason. Ben Franklin, he was a Mason. Thomas Jefferson, he was a Mason. Some people don't think so, but he was. Paul Revere and all the rest of them. They were all Masons. They knew about the Kensington Runestone. They knew about that land claim. What is so obvious and just punching people in the face, historians never talk about the obvious, right? And I'll tell you what it is. What are a couple of the main tenets of our Constitution? Freedom of religion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, politically, you might wonder what happened to that these days, but that was one of the reasons that our country was founded. Why? Because they were sick and tired of the oppression of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what group suffered tremendously from the persecution of the Roman Catholic? The Knights Templar, for God's sake, right? Okay, do you see a connection there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you the other one.
Okay.
Who did we fight for our independence?
England,
right?
Yes.
The crown, the king and queen, right? The monarchs of Europe.
Those trumpet-eating...
Who persecuted the Knights Templar? The King of France and England. I mean, are you seeing the connective dots here?
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, I just, like, you brought up Christopher Columbus a little bit ago, and there's parts of me that sometimes that it's like, how is that still a thing? Oh, well, Columbus, discovered North America. Did he? I mean, really?
Wait, Adam, you mean that guy that never set foot on the continent that already had millions of people living here?
Yeah.
That guy?
Yeah, what about those guys?
I mean, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's stupid if you stop and think about it, but this has been the narrative for a long time. Now, we also have to acknowledge that narrative is slowly but surely changing, right? I mean, some states have adopted Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus. And I think that's fantastic because, Columbus didn't even talk to the natives except down in the,
you found an island, sir.
And in the islands, but he was a ruthless, he committed genocide against those people. He was horrible.
You can say it, he was an asshole.
He was an asshole. And he was greedy. He was a greedy asshole, too. And it's just, well, he was. I mean, if you go back and you look at one of the documents that shows that he was connected to one of those Masonic-like orders, although he was still, but he wrote something called the Book of Privileges. I think it was in 1506, which basically outlined everything that the king and queen of Spain owed him for his work, with his 4 trips. And I mean, he was just a greedy SOB. And, we lionize this guy like he's some type of a hero. He's no hero. And believe you me, he knew all about the New World because the Templars had already been there centuries before him. And he borrowed maps from people like the descendants of the Sinclairs. He knew exactly what was going on. He discovered nothing.
Scott Wolter, forensic geologist, joining me on the show. You probably know him best from America Unearthed, his work on the Kensington Runestone, the Freemason stuff. Got some books out there, which we'll put all this information at the bottom of the page, Scott. We kind of dove right into the deep end of all this, which is pretty awesome. As you are new to our audience, I want to backtrack just a little bit because you bring up some stuff, but I think it needs a little bit of context for some of the people listening. Let's start with the easy one. What exactly is a forensic geologist?
Well, basically what I do is autopsies on concrete and rock primarily.
Okay.
So, for example, if a concrete slab cracks where they didn't expect it, or it has low strength, or the top peels off, or there's some type of failure with a concrete slab, they will take samples, they'll send them to me, we will do our forensic work, and then what we'll do is tell them what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the follow-up question is, who's responsible? So we get involved in a lot of legal litigation. I testify as an expert witness quite often, and so I'm used to that world. So, of course, we look at rock, we look at the aggregates that go into concrete prior to when it goes into the mixtures, and we qualify its use as aggregate before it ever goes into the mix. And so that's the kind of work that we do. It's all forensic work. The reason I sort of got into this other world that ended up getting me into TV was the Kensington Runestone came into our lab in 2000, and I was asked to perform a forensic study on it. I never heard of the Runestone. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't understand there was this forbidden history. I didn't understand any of that crap.
Mm-hmm.
So I did my work. I did a tombstone study. I compared the weathering of the inscription with the weathering of tombstones, same minerals, same grain size, same weathering environments, and I concluded that it was old.
Wow.
And therefore it's old. Well, I just did this in a vacuum, right?
No,
And
I'm sorry. That was one of those things. It's like, oh, it's old. Way to go, Scott.
yeah, well, it was old, and I just went, well, good for you. Therefore, it can't be a late 19th century hoax as everybody claimed. I found out later, and I said it was genuine. And oh my God, that's when the hit the fan.
For the people that, we're talking about the Kensington Runestone. Obviously, I've heard you talk about this before. In short, what is it and why is it important?
Well, the Runestone was found by a Swedish immigrant farmer in the fall of 1898 who was clearing trees in preparation for farming when he tipped over this 30-year-old tree with his two sons, and tightly wrapped in the roots of the tree underneath it was this 202-pound stone with a long inscription carved in runes, Scandinavian runes, but there's other characters on there that really add to the mystery. But essentially what it says is 8 Goths and 22 Northmen on this acquisition business or taking up land from Vinland far to the west. We had a camp near 2 shelters, 1 day's journey north from the stone. We were fishing one day. After we came home, found 10 men red from blood and death, AVM, 3 Latin letters, and then the last line on the face says, save from evils. Then on the split side of the stone, split because it was a larger slab of rock, the carver split down to these sacred dimensions of 2 to 1. On the split side, it says, there are 10 men by the inland sea with our ships, 14 days' journey from this island, year 1362.
1362.
Yep, 1362 doesn't fit the narrative. This is 130 years before Chris, right?
Yeah.
And this is back in 1898, so it must be a hoax, and it was summarily declared a hoax. Now, the linguists at the time were able to make out much of the inscription, but not all of it. And we know now that a lot of what they couldn't figure out is because we're talking about the Templars who interacted with Arabs during the Crusades, and there are things like pentatic numbers on the runestone, which are Arabic in origin. How the hell did they get on the Kensington Runestone? You don't see this in Scandinavian runestones over in Scandinavia, so they just didn't know what to do with it, and the easy thing is, instead of admitting you don't know, they just said it's a hoax and made it go away.
So back in the year 2000, this thing comes to you. Who brought it to you and why?
Well, the runestone is currently housed at a small museum up in Kensington, or up in Alexandria, Minnesota, which is 15 miles from Kensington, roughly, the farm where it was found.
Yeah.
The farm now where it was found is a county park. You can go up there. It's absolutely beautiful. But the stone is in the museum, and they were the ones that came to me and asked me if I would do the forensic study.
So you do this study, you figure out that it is in fact old, and it essentially shouldn't be there. What happened after?
Well, I got blasted by people I didn't even know. And, you're a kook, you don't know what you're talking about, this thing's a fake, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, it isn't. And then I said, look, I'm a scientist. If you don't agree with the work that I did, tell me where I messed up or ask me questions. I mean, I have no problem.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I may have made a mistake. And the important thing is, it's not about me being right. It's about getting the right answer. I mean, that's what I have to do. I mean, some of the work that I do, we did all the work on the fire-damaged concrete at the Pentagon after 9/11. People have died on projects I've worked on. This isn't kidding around, right? I take my work very seriously, and I took my work on the Runestone very seriously. So I said, look, tell me where I screwed up. And my work was peer-reviewed by 8 geologists. I knew it was good, but that's not what I heard. It was, well, you're an idiot, you're a fraud, all this stuff. And, at first I was puzzled, and then I got pissed. And I said, okay, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I want to understand what the hell the problem is. So I took 5 trips to Sweden to look for the evidence the rock told me had to be there.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because rocks don't have agendas. Rocks don't have personalities. They don't have egos. They just are. I trust the rocks. I don't always trust people. And the rock told me it was real. Therefore, that means if it's real, that everything in that inscription has to be consistent with the 14th century, because that's the date that's on it, 1362. So I went over to Sweden 5 different times over a period of 2.5 years, from 2003 to 2005, and I found everything. And I became a pretty, I'm not going to call myself a linguist, but I worked with some of the top linguists in the world and runologists, and I get it. Okay, I understand the history of how these runes developed and why in medieval times the language was coalescing and all these different things. So I educated myself, and I found everything. And of course, you would think, well, gee, they must have been happy that you found it. No, that pissed them off even more, because I had the nerve to go in their backyard to look for and find what they were too lazy to go look for. But you got to remember, they assumed it was a hoax. Why bother? I knew it was real. That's why I went. And I knew I'd find it if I looked. You don't find anything sitting around talking about it. You got to get off your ass and go look.
Scott Wolter, the expert on the Kensington Runestone. Is it cool to call you an expert on the Kensington Runestone?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I don't say that to be braggadocious. It's just a fact. I've written 4 books. I got a brand new book coming out where either it was the central focus or plays a large role. But you have to understand something. The Kensington Runestone is arguably the most important historical artifact in the history of our country, because it was the beginning of the founding of this country, and it's vitally important. The problem is it opens up an enormous chapter of history that a lot of people don't want to talk about, most notably the Catholic Church. I mean, the Templars were aligned with the Catholic Church and pretended to be Catholic, but they weren't. They were goddess. They venerated the sacred feminine. They were dualists. Mm-hmm. And they pretended to be Catholic just to be politically expedient. You ever heard that phrase, keep your friends close, your enemies closer?
Yeah, Godfather, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, look, they're not the first. They're not the first ones to come up with that plan. Let me tell you. But I mean, it's really it's an incredible story. But it wasn't that difficult to figure out. I have to be honest with you. The trail to the Templars, starting with the Runestone, was arguably the easiest evidence trail I've ever followed, and it went to them and only them. And everything fits, and that's how forensics work. If you have a piece of data hanging out there that doesn't fit the thread, you're not there yet. This one is cohesive, it's consistent, there's voluminous evidence, and it's obvious. And it's only a matter of time before the truth is going to come out. But it's happening. I guess the reason that I pushed so hard is because of the attacks that I endured, and I still endure. But maybe it's the fact that I played linebacker in college. I don't back down. I'm just not going to put up with it.
Well, we're going to talk about that part later, because I wanted to talk football with you. Actually.
All right, let's do it, man.
Scott Wolter, forensic geologist, host of America Unearthed, expert on the Kensington Runestone. Is there a part of you, and this is going to be kind of a weird question, but late at night when you're laying in bed or whatever, it's like, I may be a person that's helping change the history of this country?
Oh, I don't know. I hear people say that kind of stuff. I don't dwell on those kind of things, because you know what? I the way I look at life is, we all came into this world with nothing, and we're going to go out with nothing, right? And I just want people to say nice things at my funeral. I feel very fortunate. I have a wife who still finds me interesting after 33 years. My kids still call me and hang out with us, and I have a lot of great friends, and I can still play basketball and run around, and my joints aren't broken. I mean, I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world, and I get to do this wonderful TV show, and I have nothing to complain about. I'm very, very fortunate, and and to be able to work on meaningful projects like the Rune Stone and the Newport Tower and all these other things. I just want to get it right. I want it to be acknowledged. I want the history to be accepted for what it is. And there's a lot of people that have been behind these artifacts and sites. I mean, one of my closest friends in the world is the grandson of the guy who found the Rune Stone, Darwin Ullman, and he's one of the most wonderful people that I've had the pleasure to know in my life. And I've seen the impact on his family over the years and historically over what happened with the Rune Stone, accusing Olaf of finding this, which is just complete nonsense. And, the suicides that have been in that family due in part to the harassment that the family received.
Really?
And it's not right. And I'm just going to fight till I'm done to make sure that the truth is known and that these people are exonerated, because they had nothing to do with it. And it's terrible the way they've been treated.
Scott Wolter joining me on a special Side Jobs edition of 151. You can go to 151theshow.com or the station's website.com to find out more about all of this. We'll have all of Scott's information at the bottom of the page. I want to head over to the world of America Unearthed, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How did that show come around? Because as I was getting ready for this interview and kind of rewatching some of it, that's originally how I, found out about you. How does a show like that come around? Was that something you pitched to H2, or was that, hey, we've got an idea for a show and we think Scott Wolter would be the man who changed North American history, would be perfect for it?
Well, it started with the Rune Stone, of course.
Yeah.
I remember back in, this must have been 2007, a reporter for WCCO TV came to my office to interview me about a murder case that we had worked on, where we had helped identify a murder victim who was found buried in a shallow grave in the desert outside of Las Vegas, totally encased in concrete. And that's an amazing story in itself. But she came in to interview me, and she saw a poster of the Rune Stone hanging in my office that I had got when I was over in one of my trips to Sweden. I spoke at a conference over there, and she said, "Oh, have you studied the Kensington Runestone?" And I laughed, and I said, "Sit down. This is going to take a while."
I don't know if you know this or not. I've changed North American history.
No, I didn't say it. But anyway, I said, "Sit down and we'll talk about it." So when I got done, she went home and told her husband, who was Andy Oz. They were in the process of starting a production company, but she was still working at CCO at the time. So ironically, that Saturday, I had a lecture in town here in Chanhassen at the library about the Rune Stone, and he came to hear it. And then afterwards, he and I and Janet went out to lunch, and he said, "God, this would make a great documentary. Let's raise some money and let's do it." And I don't know why I did it. It was kind of a silly idea when I think back about it, but we raised $150,000, and Andy and his production crew put together a 4.5-minute, pitch reel, and they went to Reel Screen, where all the networks go a couple times a year, and shows get pitched to them, and they pitched it. And 6 networks wanted it. And History ended up paying the most, and they were doing H2 at the time. That was their other network. So they wanted us to be on the new network. And so that's how we got on there. And we did 3 seasons. We finished as the #1 show, and ratings were going up, and we were all set to do a season 4 when History sold H2 to Viceland. And we were never canceled. A lot of people say, "Well, your show was canceled." No, we were not canceled, ever. We were on the upswing. But what happened was, I remember my agent said, "Well, I don't know a network that doesn't renew its #1 show." He said, "They will move you over to Big History, and that's where your new home will be." So anyway, while they were talking about all that, I ended up doing another show for History. They asked me to help out a show that had kind of stagnated because they couldn't get permits to dive. But it was a show called Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar. And they said, "Could you bring some Templar content?" Well, I was doing research, and I said, "Well, sure." "Well, where do you want to go, Scott?" "Well, let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to Portugal. Let's go to India. It was literally like that. And fortunately, we were able to, I think, generate some really, really good content. And unfortunately, though, there were some political things that happened with that show with Barry Clifford, and they didn't renew it. But we did 6 episodes, and it was a lot of fun. And then as we were finishing that, my agent called me, and he said, "History has decided not to renew your show." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Because," he said, "your show is too smart for History." And I said, "Oh." And then I went through their lineup, and I have to say, I think he was right.
Well, it had to be aliens.
It's so funny. You know what I get asked about every single friggin' day?
What's that?
The Oak Island show.
You know what? I was going to ask you about it, but I could never figure out if you were actually a part of that show or...
Never, and I never will, because it's a fake show.
Okay, because...
There's nothing on that island. The brothers know it. The network knows it. But they have got a ratings monster on their hands, so they throw anything and everything up against the wall. They never close the loop on anything because they may want to go back to it. And it's just ridiculous. I've been asked to be on that show 3 times, and I said no every time. I care about my credibility.
When I was getting ready to do this interview, I was thinking about the Oak Island stuff, and I stumbled across it was an article, and it had a couple quotes from you that you weren't allowed to talk about the show because you were still kind of affiliated with them, and some kind of stuff like that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to just drop this. But when I
can talk about anything I want, and I'm the one thing that I will never do is anybody. I'm going to tell the truth the way it is, and I don't appreciate some of the things that they've done on that show, like pretend to find a hooked X and use the research that I've developed to try to further their show. And what they found on that show was clearly planted. And I told Prometheus, I said, don't do that crap. And, I can't tolerate that. I think the reason that people watched our show and have supported the work that I've done is because I just don't. I will tell you the truth, and I will tell you if I don't know. I'll tell you if I think it's real. I'll tell you if I don't think it's real. And I'm sorry if you don't like it, but I've been doing that for 33 years. That's my job.
I will tell you this about that show. Whenever I do watch it, I always get to the end and I go, why did I watch this? It's always, hey, we may have found something in the big giant hole in the earth. Okay, let's send a diver down. Oh, guess what? It was just a rock, or it was a pile of soil or something.
Well,
why?
That does happen, okay? There are times that we've looked at things and it turns out to be nothing, right?
Yeah.
But it can't be every single time for 6 years.
Well, it's like the ghost shows.
Good God, if they've done anything, they've proven there's nothing there.
Yeah. It's like, it's that, or it's really well hidden, guys. You may want to stop dumping money into this thing.
There's nothing. Look, the whole thing with the flood tunnels, really, it's called the water table. Anytime you dig below the level of the ocean, it's an island on the ocean.
Yeah.
Hello. You dig below the water table, it's going to fill in. For God's sakes, it's so basic. But, I would just go on there. I'd buzzkill everything. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that those guys are the first ones to walk those beaches with a metal detector?
Oh, absolutely not.
Really? So what does that mean? I don't believe any of that stuff is real. They go to France and they see this amazing craft. And then 2 weeks later, they go to the island. Oh, look what we found. Oh, amazing. It's the same cross. Really? Really? And people buy it. It's like,
no, they do.
My God.
I was saying a second ago, it's kind of like the ghost shows. Whenever you go ghost hunting, you don't always find something. And
right.
And a majority of the time when you go ghost hunting, it's just you sitting in the dark talking to a recorder.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. Every once in a while you may stumble across something that you can't explain. That doesn't mean it's paranormal, but it just doesn't happen like that. But staying with your show, a question I actually had, because I was going through the episode list, and you covered everything, Rune Stone stuff, Ark of the Covenant, Bigfoot I think was in there, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I
wasn't wild about doing the Bigfoot episode until they said you could go to Nepal, and I'm like, oh my God, that's like the holy grail of geology, right? So I said, I'm in.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about it. When you do a show like that and you have so many different topics, is that all stuff you wanted to do? Like, did you have control over that? Or was it, hey, you can go do, the story about the Templars, but we need you to go to Nepal to do a Bigfoot story? Like, how does that work?
The reality is the episodes that we do are I'd say probably a third what I call my stuff, the stuff that ideas I bring to them. The other third is the production company, and then the other third is the network. And, I didn't bring Bigfoot to them, but they brought it to me. And I remember telling myself, I'm never going to do an episode on Bigfoot. That's just dumb. But then I thought about it, and I go, okay, I ask people to be open-minded about my stuff. I guess turnabout is fair play. And then, of course, Nepal was a huge draw, and I'm like, okay, and it was a fantastic trip. I mean, it was one of the highlights of my life. And the other thing I said is, look, if unless I see a skeleton or a body or I shake Bigfoot's hand, I'm going in a skeptic, I'm going out a skeptic, right?
Yeah, which is a good way to do that stuff.
Well, and that's the way it went. But I'm not sitting here saying that there isn't a Bigfoot. I'm just skeptical of it. I have not seen the evidence for it. I can tell you this. I talked to people when I did that show that I 100% believe that they believe they saw Bigfoot. Okay. That doesn't mean they did, but they believe they did. That was very compelling. So at the end of the day, the answer is there is Bigfoot real? I don't know. I didn't prove it either way.
Scott, with Bigfoot in mind and, going on shows like Coast to Coast, talking to dudes like, Jimmy Church and so on and so forth, you get kind of thrown into that world of the weird. It's not the best way to say it, but that's
definitely. But you know what? It's, I mean, I think people tend to pigeonhole people into broad categories, and sometimes it's fair and sometimes it's not. These venues give us an opportunity to get our message out and to educate people about what we think is important. And I think, for the most part, people respect the work that we do, and I wouldn't do it if I thought that it was hurting my credibility. My customers enjoy the show, and look, they're smart people. They're all engineers and scientists, and they're not stupid. And if I was doing something that they thought was dumb, they wouldn't hire me. I care very much about my credibility. But, if we end up going to conferences with people that are doing fringy stuff, that's their business.
Yeah.
And my business is my business. The people that I've interacted with at these conferences have all been really good people. They're out there doing what they are passionate about and they feel is important, and I can't criticize them for that.
Well, you bring up a good term, the kind of fringy stuff, and that sounds better than me saying the world of the weird. But the question.
Well, fringe is what is fringe? What does that mean? I mean, to some people, it's a negative. It has a negative connotation, but it's getting into the area of the controversial. Subject matter. I mean, the Kensington Runestone is wildly controversial. Now, it isn't to me. To me, it's self-evident what it is and all of that, but to a lot of other people, the whole idea that the Templars came here, they just don't understand it. Talk to the Native Americans. They know about the Templars. They call them their blood brothers. They shared a similar ideology, and that's why they had success here, and they were able to keep it quiet. I mean, when settlement happened, what happened to the natives? They were killed, in part due to the fact that they knew the true history here. And they and conveniently for certain entities in our government and the Roman Church, getting rid of the natives was helped their cause.
Yeah,
and it's terrible. I mean, it's a horrible thing, and I think that we need to acknowledge what happened. We need to apologize and move forward. The natives know, and they still know, and they're ready to talk. We just need to listen.
Scott Wolter, forensic geologist, host of America Unearthed. Just kind of it's kind of the fun question with this, but, with those fringy subjects, is there another one out there that you're maybe not studying every day, but have a passing interest in it, whether it is, the cryptozoology, whether it is, paranormal or ufology or, something out there in that kind of area. Is there one of those subjects that does kind of grab your attention?
Well, I have to admit that the whole concept of aliens I find extremely interesting. I mean, you go to these ancient native cultures, the Mayans, the Mesoamerican cultures, they all had a belief or some type of connection with extraterrestrials. And it's not just them. This is something that's found around the world. And while I haven't seen evidence to convince me of it yet, I'm certainly open-minded to it. I mean, if you stop and just look at the numbers and how vast the universe is, could there be another planet that sustains life? I think there's probably millions of planets in the galaxy that are capable of sustaining life. It doesn't mean they all do, but there's got to be at least one other one there, or maybe a certain number. And where are they along in their evolutionary history? Have they developed the ability to travel across the galaxy? Maybe. It's fun to think about. I was always a huge fan of Star Trek and things like time travel. I mean, maybe there's technology that our government has already developed that they haven't shared with us. Maybe they developed it a long time ago and they haven't shared it with us. Those kinds of things are certainly possible. It'd be fun to know more. I'm sure there is more.
Well, I always thought about it, you think about atomic bomb. That's almost 100 years ago in technology.
Yeah.
Think about what we haven't doled out, because we haven't needed to. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the other thing is that if you think about our military, the technology and the planes and the helicopters and the boats and everything that our military has that we know of today, that's all 15, 20, 25-year-old technology.
Yeah.
What they have now, we're not going to find out about for another 20, 25 years. What do they have? And what do they have that they're never going to tell us about? I'm confident there's something else there. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. Scott, as we start getting towards the end of this, I feel like I've talked your ear off tonight. What do you got going on right now? What have you been working on?
Well, I can tell you that I am working on a TV project that I'm very excited about. I can't say anything yet, but I think that when it is announced, I think people are going to be excited. I think they're going to watch it. I can tell you that I'm excited that there is going to be some things that will be revealed that will literally make people. I don't know what it's going to do. It's going to be nuts, but I think people are really going to like it. So I'll just tease you with that,
okay.
And next time we talk, I'll be able to go into a lot more detail. Hey, one thing I would like to do is I'd like to give a shout out to a couple of good friends of mine, Mike Arbuthnot and Blue Nelson. They have a 6-part series that's going to premiere on Science Channel Monday night. And, Mike was a regular guest on America Unearthed, and he's a super guy. He's a wonderful archaeologist. He's a great TV personality. And Blue Nelson is a guy that I met when he did a show called Found, which was an outgrowth of America Unearthed. And he served in our military. He's just a really smart guy. He's an archaeologist, and he's just a really good guy. And the two of them go on this quest for Vikings in America. And I know a little bit about some of the things that they looked into, and I think it'll be a good show. So Monday night, you guys should check that out.
Perfect. Scott, I know you've got some books out there. We'll put, where's the best place to get your books? And if
Probably my website. You can get my books on Amazon, but if you go to the website, which is www.hookedx.com, HOOKEDX.com, I sign every book that's bought off the site. So check that out. And I have a new book that's coming out here very soon. It's called Cryptic Code of the Templars in America, Origins of the Hooked X.
Okay.
So might be the best thing I've done yet.
If someone is just listening to all this for the first time tonight, which of your books would probably be the best place to start?
I would say The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America.
Okay.
because I do sort of a brief overview of the Rune Stone. My first book in this material was the Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence, but that's that 574-page tome that goes into excruciating detail, but it proves the case. But the Hooked X has a summary of all that, and then goes into the new stuff, and I think that's the place to start.
All right, perfect. HookedX.com. I'll put a link to it at the bottom of the page. All right, the final thing before I let you go for the night, you're a football guy. I did not know this. I did not know this about you until the other day when I was watching one of your talks.
I went to Duluth, University of Minnesota Duluth, a Division II school on a football scholarship, and played 4 years up there, won a couple championships. I had a wonderful experience up there. I had a really tough coach, but he was great, and his name is Jim Molosky. The stadium is up in Duluth is now named after him. And then I played 4 years of minor league ball for the Minneapolis Lumberjacks. Later, long after college, but I played 4 years. I had a wonderful time. We won one championship there in the Metrodome, and I live to tell about it. So, and then I played years of touch football and flag football. I still play flag with my son and his team. So, yeah, football has been a big part of our life. We're season ticket holders, and when I talk about different things, I use football metaphors all the time, and I just think it's the greatest sport ever. I mean, I think we need to do things to make it safer, but you get a lot of people involved. You got just every type of person, the big guys, the little guys, and everything in between. We got a place for everybody in that game, and I just think it's wonderful.
Who's your team?
Minnesota Vikings, man.
Okay, so you are a season ticket holder for the Vikings, huh?
I am a season ticket holder. My wife and I go to all the games, and we're long-suffering Viking fans, but one of these years they're going to do it.
I was going to say...
And yes, I'm sick and tired of the Patriots.
You know what? There's part of me that doesn't mind watching the Patriots win, because there's something about the bad guy winning now. And if you really think about it, everybody hates the Patriots for the reason that they're good,
Well, I have a lot of friends in that area, and of course they're all gaga over the Patriots, and I find ways to give them crap, but I mean, you have to appreciate the success that they've had. And as good as Tom Brady is, and I give him a lot of credit, the guy that stirs that drink is the straw in that drink is Belichick. And what he does is he'll take players that have been abandoned by other teams, that were players that were uncoachable, and by the time they get there, they realize that it's the system. It's not about you. And I've always been one of these guys where, if you're a running back or a wide receiver and you score a touchdown, act like you've been there, okay?
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you, but your job is to score touchdowns, all right? I'm old school that way, and everybody has to do their job, and the offensive linemen are the reason that you guys get all the attention that you get. And Belichick knows that if he's going to, you can't throw a touchdown pass laying on your back. You got to have offensive linemen to protect Brady, and that's why he's so successful. But they don't get the credit, and they don't care. They just wear those rings.
Yeah, I was going to say, whenever you make fun of the Patriots fan, do they just hold up 6 rings for you?
Yeah. Can you hold on a sec here? Can you hold my ring for me?
Yeah, exactly. Scott Wolter.
No, you got to give him credit.
Well, you know what? The other reason I kind of like the Patriots is because my team, the Iowa Hawkeyes, Kirk Ferentz is a Belichick guy. He comes from that coaching tree.
Oh, okay. He's from that coaching tree, huh?
Yeah, him and Saban and a couple other ones. So
it's a dynasty in real time. So enjoy it, because it will end at some point.
Yes, it will. Scott Wolter, forensic geologist, host of America Unearthed. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it. You're a fascinating guy. And also, thank your wife for me, Janet. She's just awesome at getting this stuff scheduled and stuff. So I really appreciate it.
She does it all. I always tell people, if you want to get me, contact her.
Yeah.
She'll make it happen.
As busy as she talked about you being, I mean, do you guys, other than going to Vikings games, you're taking her out, right?
Oh, yeah. No, we spend a lot of time together. We get along great, and I mean, you can always do more for your wives, that's for sure, but I sure try.
Good deal. Scott, thank you so much for coming on tonight. I appreciate it.
All
man.
right. Well, thanks, Adam. Let's do it again, okay?
Perfect. Again, we'll have all of Scott's information at the bottom of the page. Go check it out and enjoy his material. This has been a special Side Jobs edition of 151. We're brought to you by Skeleton Wines. You can find out more about them at their website, skeletonwine.com, or on their Facebook page at Skeleton Vineyards. That's for us. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr, all at 151 The Show. And don't forget to subscribe to our Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google, and every other channel we're a part of. That's going to do it for us this time around. If you missed anything, always head to 151theshow.com or this station's website.com. We'll see you next time, friends. Bye.